And a very, very warm welcome to everyone watching. This is Tim's Final Confessions. I'm Tim Derling, and this is a very special episode. We've been planning it for most of this year. We are counting down our ranked top 30 albums from 35 years ago, 1987. Why is 1987 35 years ago? Don't know. And this is a new configuration. Everybody has been on here before, but not together. So sitting with Matt Phillips is the one, the only Bug Campbell. Hello, Andy. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
And of course, we've got Will and Jex. This is going to be a lot of fun. I guess before we get started, I'm not going to bother asking Will because in 1987 he was minus 13, and Jex I think would have been 2.
Yeah.
But so I guess I'll ask Andy and Matt. You guys can go at one after the other. When you think of 1987, what comes to mind?
For me, I was in, Tim, you and I are the same age. So grade 6 into grade 7 was 1987. So, just becoming a teenager and all the fun that comes along with that. That's where I was at that point in my life, and really into music at that point, and mostly hard rock and metal.
Yeah, they say that the music that you started listening to when you were, say, age 12 or 13 is the stuff that kind of sticks with you throughout your life. I was 13 going on 14 in 1987. So a lot of these albums, I didn't even have to go back and listen to them. It's stuff that I've just loved for so long. So
yeah,
but I just discovered too.
Yeah, in 1987, I was first half of 1987, I was finishing grade 7 and I started grade 8 in the fall. So I must be a year older. Awkward years, but music was the salvation, right? It was the first year that I really started buying albums, or when I could, as opposed to just recording songs off the radio. I'd gotten so into Bon Jovi that year. That summer was the summer of Bon Jovi for me. We won't be talking about them on the 87 episode, but I will say one of my fun memory was listening to the radio one night, and they played Edge of a Broken Heart, and I'm like, what song is this? Do they have a new album out already? I had no idea, right? So good memories. A lot of great albums came out this year. A lot of these albums I didn't have until later because, like I said, I'm just starting to buy the albums. So some of these, there are very, very cool stories behind. And like some of our previous episodes where we go through a year, I know the albums we're going to be talking about, and I know who's going to be talking about each one, but I don't know the order. So that's all about the order. Matt holds the cards. He's the dealer on this one. So I guess I'll turn it over to Matt, and he can tell us who's going to start off with our number 30 album from 1987.
All right, guys. So we whittled this down. We actually had kind of like a really good master list of nearly 60 albums. Whittled it down to the top 30. And we're going to kick it off with Jex. At number 30 is an album by Armored Saint called Raising Fear. Jex rated this one, actually, out of his top 30, he rated it at number 5. Jex, what do you want to say about Armored Saint?
Well, this is what it looks like. As you can see, I don't have the album, so I printed out the album cover. Here's the funny thing. Armored Saint, I was somewhat knowledgeable of them. I know who they were. I know their debut album, March of the Saint, from 84. Wonderful album. That's all I own by them. And then someone brought this to the table. I'm not too sure who, and I listened to it. I'm like, this is good. This is what I'd expect from, the band who did March of the Saint. It's great stuff. This was their third album, and released on September 5th, 1987. And like I said, didn't know much about Armored Saint. I know John Bush, the vocalist, he went on to be vocalist for Anthrax from 92 all the way up to the early 2000s. But listening to this, it's just straight up metal. It's not thrash, it's not speed, it's just traditional metal. And if that's what you're into, you love this album. I was pleasantly surprised. Like I said, this was my first listen, and then went all the way up to my number 5, I think you said. So yeah, so I highly recommend it. Like I said, I can't say too much else because it's new to me, but I like it so far.
Would anyone else like to say, add anything to the Armored Saint Raising Fear?
So I was the one that brought this album to the table. It was introduced to me 2 summers ago when I worked at the Sabian Cymbal Factory from one of the cymbal testers, actually. He told me to check out Armored Saint because he knew some of the other stuff I listened to. And I listened to them, and it's just like Jack said, just really solid metal from the 80s. So I had it ranked somewhere. It wasn't quite that high, but it's a good album.
Next, we're actually going to hear from Andy. Coming in at number 29 on our list is Let Me Up, I've Had Enough by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Wow, I really like that album cover.
This is a kind of Tom Petty album right before Free Falling, I think it was. I found this actually on Kijiji. You don't see this one out in the wild very much. Somebody on Kijiji was selling a stack of albums for $5. And I thought I saw a Megadeth album at the bottom of the picture. And I was like, you know what? I think it's the Megadeth album. I'm going to just buy the stack albums. And this album actually happened to be in the stack. And it was the Megadeth album. So Far, So Good, So What. So for $5, that's how this got into my collection. This was a few years ago. But this was kind of, like I say, an overlooked Tom Petty album. He had spent the previous year touring with Bob Dylan. Not many hits off this album. I think Jammin' Me was the big one. But it hit number 20 on the Billboard 100.
Awesome.
So that's Tom Petty.
That one actually just squeaked onto our top 30. A few of us ranked it really close. Andy had it at 26. I had it at 30, and Tim had it at 34. So moving on, we're going to go to hear from Tim this time. Number 28 is Night Ranger with Big Life. Tim actually put this in his top 10. He ranked it at number 7.
Yeah, of course, one of my favorite melodic rock bands from the 80s, and they're still putting out good music. You know, as of last year, they put out a new album. Will and I reviewed that. This is one whenever possible, because it's 1987 and that was the prime, and this too, prime Walkman years. Whenever I could, I grabbed the cassette version of the album if I owned them. But this one, I actually got the CD version. And the reason I got the CD version is this is the very first CD I ever bought. I bought this like in 1990, and it was a markdown. I actually bought it in its long box, and because we had just gotten a CD player in the house, and I thought, wouldn't it be funny to have some CDs? I didn't really plan on. I had my cassettes, right? I had like a couple hundred cassettes at that point. But anyway, so yeah, this was the fourth Night Ranger album. It did go gold, but it wasn't as successful as the previous two, which both went platinum. No top 40 singles off this album. The great hope for this album is that they were hoping that they were going to score a soundtrack song with The Secret of My Success, which was from the Michael J. Fox movie of the same name, which is a very 80s soundtrack-ish sounding song. I like it. This album, other than that, though, there weren't any songs that made any sort of impact. And I don't even think that movie was all that big. So they kind of put all their eggs in one basket. But there's great songs on here. The title song, Carry On's a great song. Better Let It Go is sort of a quasi ballad, and it's just Night Ranger. There's nothing particularly different sounding about it. This was their first album, though, that wasn't produced by a guy named Pat Glasser, who produced their first three. This one was actually produced by Kevin Elson, which is a name you'll recognize if you like Journey and Europe, and except for The Secret of My Success, which is produced by David Foster. So yeah, got it out on CD because it was my first CD.
Anyone else add anything to the Night Ranger discussion?
I don't have anything to add, but I actually had that ranked at number 8. Me and Tim seem to be on the same wavelength with Night Ranger a lot, and yeah, it's just a really consistent Night Ranger sounding album.
Which surprises me, to be honest, that of all the people that would be Will, but anyway,
What can you do?
That's cool. That's cool.
Moving on to number 27 is a Canadian band that was really huge on the mid to late 80s. Their first 2 albums, I believe, actually went platinum in Canada. For some reason, they weren't able to score that US record deal. Tim might be able to say a little bit more about this, but at number 27, we have Haywire's second album, Haywire being from Charlottetown, the little Prince Edward Island here on the Atlantic coast. This is their second album, Don't Stand There. This one was produced by Brian Allen, who was an Attic Records executive. He's also produced, I looked into his credits. He's worked on Lee Aaron's What You Do to My Body single / album. And a little bit of backstory about Haywire. They actually formed back in 1985, put out an EP, and they were in a few contests, sort of like a battle of the bands kind of thing. And they won a $10,000 battle of the bands contest, which helped them record their first album. And then that's when they signed with Attic Records. The big hits off of this one are Dance Desire. And there's actually, this is in the era when, so CDs were just coming out, 1987. In order to get people to want to buy versions, they would include bonus tracks, which I've noticed on a few of these albums. We just have, this is actually Andy's vinyl record. There was a bonus track, another remix version of Dance Desire that I actually really like, if you ever want to check that out. So that was number 27, Haywire. I rated that one actually all the way up to number 15. It's an album that we hear of this still all the time on radio in Canada. Didn't love it back then, but it's since really grown on me. So
Yeah, the story behind that is the same fate that befell an awful lot. I think most artists that were on Attic Records in Canada. Attic Records is a very successful independent label in Canada, but if you talk to most of the artists on the label, so that would be Lee Aaron and Anvil and of course other Teenage Head, yeah, other yeah, a lot of examples are coming to me right now, but they did have offers from US labels, but they could not get out of the contract with Attic Records, so they just crisscrossed Canada until the well was dry. And it's kind of a shame. And I think the reason that happened is because Triumph were an early band on Attic Records. They successfully got off of Attic Records and did really well on MCA. And after that, I'm sure that Attic Records said, no, these contracts are going to be ironclad. And I think Night Ranger would have had as you know, they might have done, you know, maybe not multi-platinum albums, but they might have gotten down into the States, gotten some opening slots, and maybe scored some minor radio hits, kind of like Honeymoon Suite did. They definitely had the hooks and, you know, what it, you know, that sort of pop rock, sometimes bordering on hard rock. But yeah, that's why they never scored outside of Canada, really.
yeah, now speaking of CanCon, we're going to talk about one of the most well-known Canadian artists of all time. Moving on to number 26, we're going to hear from Tim this time. He ranked this album at number 17. This is Bryan Adams, Into the Fire.
Okay, so this is an album that I would have had back in 1987. I mean, Bryan Adams was everywhere at that point. And then everybody kind of just forgot about him until like Waking Up the Neighbors came out. And it's like, oh yeah, we did like this guy. But anyway, this album was 3 years. It followed on the heels of Reckless, which was his biggest album, had like 6 top 10 singles, 6 top 20 singles off of it. And at the time, I think A&M Records were really pressuring, you know, keep that momentum going, keep that momentum going. So this is one of those albums that had the distinction of selling something like 2-3 million copies, but still ended up in the delete bins or with chunks taken out of them because they just pressed too many copies. It didn't sell as many copies as Reckless, but it still did, you know, quite well. A little bit more serious lyrically. He and Jim Vallance wanted to branch out and not just write like relationship songs, even though they were really good at that. But the first single was the biggest hit off the album, Heat of the Night. It's one of his, you know, many top 10 singles. I love the song. But one of my favorite songs is a song that is really out of place on the album because it was written and recorded for the Reckless sessions. It's Hearts on Fire, which is typical Bryan Adams song, but I just absolutely love it. I rated it when Sarah and I did our top 10 Bryan Adams songs. It was both of those songs featured on there. Other than that, the song Victim of Love was a minor top 40 single in the States, but that was a really different sounding ballad for him. It was very more serious sounding, kind of dark, wasn't exactly happy. It wasn't heaven or straight from the heart. It was very kind of, you know, harsh reality or whatever. But another song on here, Only the Strong Survive, was originally going to be on the Top Gun soundtrack. For whatever reason, that didn't happen. So to listen to this album, you would think, well, this is a Bryan Adams album. It doesn't sound different than anything else, but it's just that the hype behind the album before it and then the one that followed it kind of left this one in the dust, but still a good album and worth a listen.
Right on, Tim. Moving on from Bryan Adams, we're going to talk about another absolutely massive 80s solo artist. We're going to take two people to talk about this one. At number 25, this is going to be Will's actual #1 pick. And I think Andy's got a copy of it to show us. This is Michael Jackson's 1987 album, Bad.
So I could take the whole episode talking about this album, which I'm going to try not to do. So this is Michael Jackson's 7th solo album, but his 3rd when he left the Motown record label and went to the Epic label. Obviously, it was a huge anticipated album because his prior album was Thriller, which sold like 70 million copies. This one only sold 35 million copies and only went diamond in the US, whereas Thriller went 3 times diamond. It sold 2.25 million albums the first week in the US alone. I mean, it's just a massive album. It was his last produced by Quincy Jones. It reached #1 in 25 countries. It had 9 singles released. 5 went #1 with I Just Can't Stop Loving You, Bad, The Way You Make Me Feel, Man in the Mirror, Dirty Diana. It came with the Streetwalker movie, which came out the year following, I believe. But this is my favorite Michael Jackson album. Smooth Criminal is my favorite song. I think that's the greatest video of all time. I probably played it out to death from when I was like 3. I've listened to Michael Jackson the longest out of any artist in my life. I could go on and on, but I'm not going to do that. So, but yeah, this is my #1 by far. It wasn't even a question for me when I started making my list.
Dirty Diana is such a great song. You never hear it on the radio or anything. Like it's like no one talks about it, but it's such a good song.
Steve Stevens on guitar, I believe, on that one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Moving to number 24, this is a self-titled band by Faster Pussycat. We're going to hear from Andy again, who actually ranked this at number 17.
So this hit number 97 on the Billboard. That was the peak. Released July 7th, 1987. Very Aerosmith influence album. Not as much blues rock as their second album. This is considered a pure glam album with Don't Change That Song, Bathroom Wall. Great album.
Does anyone want to add anything to Faster Pussycat? Bathroom Wall. I remember seeing that video.
Yeah.
Much music.
Heavy
all the time.
rotation.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it was it their album after this one that had the cover of the Carly Simon song?
I think that came out.
That was on. Sorry, Jack or Andy. That their version of "You're So Vain" was on the Elektra 40th anniversary, where they had new Elektra artists doing songs by previous Elektra artists. That's also where Metallica "Stone Cold Crazy" came from. But their second album, "Make Me When It's Over," that's the one that had "House of Pain." I think that was their only gold album.
That was a more bluesy album. There are hints of blues rock on that. There's a song, No Room for Emotion, that's really Aerosmith 70s heavy blues rock. But the rest of it is really that Sunset Strip, Hollywood 80s glam metal.
To kind of introduce myself to Andy, I know he's seen me on the show before. I bought this album probably 5 years ago. Listened to half of it once and never listened to it again because I think it's horrible.
Well, here's the thing. In 1987 is the time when all the Motley Crue clones kind of surfaced. Faster Pussycat, LA Guns, Pretty Boy Floyd. They all look alike. They all sound alike, in my opinion. But I listened to this album because I saw it on the list. It's good stuff. But it sounds like kind of generic in all those other bands. They all kind of mishmash together in my brain. But there's a few songs. City Has No Heart, Shooting You Down. I thought those were really good songs. It's great stuff, but all those bands were kind of starting to all sound like one another at this point.
It
Was it?
mentioned place and time. So in 1987, being 13 or 14, Faster Pussycat, that's what was big at the time. Poison, LA Guns. So
Yeah.
that's for kind of the the nostalgia for me comes in. And if someone like Will goes and listens to it, I can see why you think it's like, this is garbage.
You know, sometimes you have to, you had to be there. But speaking of Poison, was this album not produced by that Rick Browd or Browdy, the same guy that produced? Because you don't see his name on a lot of albums.
Oh, you're right. It was produced by Rick Browd. Yeah.
Coming in at number 23, you're going to hear from me this time. I actually ranked this as my number 4 album of 1987. I'm breaking a little bit of the rules here, but I already cross-checked this with Tim, so we're good. This is the soundtrack to the 1987 movie, The Lost Boys. Features Kiefer Sutherland. You've got the two Corys, Corey Haim and Corey Feldman. Jason Patrick is one of the main stars in the movie. It's basically about a family that moves to Santa Clara, a fictional town in California, and there's vampire hijinks. That's all I'm going to say about that. But this soundtrack, it does have a few covers, but it's actually mostly known for not just having an ensemble cast, but having an ensemble of artists on here. A lot of these artists are actually only known by having a song on this soundtrack. For example, Eddie and the Tide have a song called Power Play. And a guy by the name of Tim Capello has a really famous song from the song, the saxophone
He's a saxophone dude. Yeah.
guy. And actually, when I first saw that scene, Tim, I thought he was just like kind of a lip syncing it or whatever. It wasn't the actual, he's the actual guy that does that song. And so he's a muscly dude with a long blonde ponytail, and he's ripping it out on saxophone. And yes, exactly. And I looked him up, and to this day, he is still performing I Still Believe in front of crowds. And that's kind of his namesake, and he's ran.
Yeah,
That's great.
It's got a really good song, Lost in the Shadows by Lou Gramm. And of course, one of my favorite bands, In Excess, we might be talking about later, did a cover of an Easy Beat song called Good Times, duet with Cold Chisel's lead singer, Jimmy Barnes. And that song actually went to number 2 on the Australian chart. So I couldn't help but list this soundtrack for The Lost Boys as my number 4, and that's our 23rd.
And I had the pleasure when I interviewed Lou Gramm, I had the pleasure of talking to him about Lost in the Shadows and filming the video for that. Yeah, great song. It's never been on one of his albums, but yeah, great song. And Good Times is such a good song. It just missed the top 40 in the States. I think it peaked at 47, but they would do all right a few months later, as it turns out.
You're going to hear from me again real quick. At number 2, we have an album that a bunch of us actually ranked in our top 20. This is Joe Satriani's second studio album, Surfing with the Alien. What did I want to say about Surfing with the Alien? This one came out in October, and it was produced by John Satriani and John Cunaberti. It's got, the notable songs, of course, are Surfing with the Alien, Satch Boogie, and there's a song on here called Crushing Day, which is sort of a heavy metal inspired song. Something I found kind of interesting, just doing a little bit of research on this album. This is the only album that Joe Satriani did that went platinum. It's still his best-selling album. Although I have to say, if you love this record, please go and check out the stuff that Joe has never stopped recording music. And in my mind, he's actually still putting out some of his best music.
Yeah.
Something I thought was kind of a shame, though. This is obviously the Marvel character, the Silver Surfer. And the license to this actually expired way back in 2018. And for whatever reason, they couldn't come to terms with Marvel to license this. So when they reissued this album, it doesn't have the Silver Surfer on the front. It's got
it's just a guitar neck with no Silver Surfer on it.
I thought that was kind of too bad, but
It's lame. It's lame. Of course, by 2018, you're not just dealing with Marvel, you're dealing with Disney.
Yeah.
And there is a version of that I am looking for in 2019 on Black Friday for Record Store Day. They released a version of it. It's I guess you've got the main album on one CD, and then on another CD, I believe, It's got just the main backing tracks, and you can solo along with Joe kind of thing if you're that talented. I mean, go.
Yeah, let's go. I would have thought, it's funny, I would have thought Flying in a Blue Dream was platinum too, but I guess not.
We are almost into our top 20. We're moving on to number 21. This one is by Dio, and we're going to hear from Jex this time, but I believe Andy's got something to show us as well.
I
Rated
think
this,
so.
yeah, this is Dream Evil. Jex rated this in his top 10. He actually rated it at number 7, and Andy rated this at number 13. What do you guys want to say about? Well, let's hear from Jex first about Dio's Dream Evil.
Yeah, so this is one that was on the list, and I gave it a listen. And when it comes to Dio, this is one that I never really explored all that much. I usually gravitate towards his two first ones, Holy Diver and The Last in Line. I think those albums are phenomenal. And the other ones, I every now and again I'll listen to them, but really not as much. So it wasn't like engraved in my brain. So when I listen to it, it's a solid album. It's you know, when you listen to a Dio album, you know what you're getting into. He's got that persona, he's got that presence, the voice. So this, you know, there's absolutely nothing wrong. It's hard to say something bad about Dio. I know that much. And the album art was done by a guy called Steve Houston, who I don't really know who that is, but I love that album art. Yeah, see, Andy's holding it up there. I don't have the album. I had to print it out. But like, you see all the creatures under the bed and over the bed. The child is sleeping. You got the mascot, Murray. His last appearance on a Dio cover. And this is great because I've been lately I've been explaining bad dreams to my oldest son. So this would be something cool to show him, but maybe I'll wait till he's a little older.
Yeah.
But I do love this album.
Don't show him the Sabbath Bloody Sabbath album just yet.
No, not anytime soon. No, but that's pretty much it. I thought it was a solid album. Hard to pick favorite tracks because, like I said, I'm kind of fairly new to it compared to the other albums that I know by heart. But the title track, Dream Evil, is really good. And Sunset Superman, it's got that chorus that'll just stay in your mind. Sunset Superman. You know? Yeah, those are two songs that really captured my attention. So that's all I can say about Dream Evil.
Right, Sunset Superman's my favorite song on the album, Jet. You're bang on that chorus. It's just like
yeah, so powerful, so good.
Ballad, I Could Have Been a Dreamer, which is, I think, on his albums previous to this, he didn't really do a ballad, so really kind of a change of pace for him on this one. But like you said, it's no different than any other Dio stuff. He's not breaking new ground, but it's solid.
Totally.
Will, a Dio fan, did you have a chance to ever check this album out?
I didn't. I really like his first album, and I like the stuff he did with Sabbath. But outside of that, I'm not a huge fan. My favorite thing he's done outside of that is probably the Tenacious D song, but I'll leave it at that. That's nowhere near 87. So
we're already into our top 20 now. Here's one that actually kind of surprised me anyway. 3 of the guys rated this one fairly highly, but we're going to hear from Will here. Number 20, we have Fleetwood Mac with Tank the Night. Andy rated this at 16. Tim rated this at 15. And actually, Will rated this as his 13th favorite album of 1987.
So the time that we were doing these rankings, 3 weeks after I started doing my list, I was headed to the Stevie Nicks concert. So I was kind of in a Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks phase anyway. But I mean, this album is really, really solid. I'm not super familiar with Fleetwood Mac outside of the Stevie Nicks era. I believe this is the last album before Lindsay left the band. Is that correct? So it went number 1 in the UK, peaked at 7 in the US and 5 in Canada, I believe. But there's just so many good songs on here. Big Love, 7 Wonders. Little Lies is one of my favorite Fleetwood Mac songs. If you looked at everything else I listened to and then at Fleetwood Mac, you would think that it was just totally, because I really like the slow ballady stuff that they've done. But Little Lies is a great song. Everywhere, I think, was a top 20 single as well. But yeah, this album's just solid the whole way through and very, of that slow, soft rock, but I'm a huge fan.
Tim and Andy had this one rated fairly high too. Did you guys have anything you wanted to add to Fleetwood Mac?
Go ahead, Andy.
It's a solid Fleetwood Mac album. You know, there's a little bit of yacht rock, even though it's 87. It's definitely a little yachty. Definitely something my wife and I like to put on and just listen to.
Yeah, it's very late period yacht rock. 1980 by 1987, yeah, it's not really, but it was a huge album. This was actually like some of the first songs I ever heard by this band, because their previous album Mirage was 82. So by now I'm actively listening to the radio. All I really knew off of this for many years were just the 4 singles. So Big Love, which of course in later years Lindsay turned into an acoustic solo virtuoso performance. Just amazing. But the original is pretty cool too. Seven Wonders is a Stevie Nicks tune. That was a top 20 single. Everywhere, as Will mentioned. And yeah, Little Lies. Little Lies is just a great pop song is all it is. And it was actually my wife Sarah that got me listening to Fleetwood Mac. So I got to hear a few more songs off this album little by little. Family Man is a fun little quirky song off here that actually was a hit in the UK, but not anywhere else. I like the song Mystified, which is a Christine song, but I really like the title song because out of nowhere, Lindsay kind of hits us with this kind of hard rock guitar sound, like in the middle of the song is like, like, and you're not expecting it. So yeah, it's, you know, I think a lot of people our age, this was, you know, a lot of people say, well, yeah, Rumors is the album, but I bet you a lot of people will swear by this album as their favorite. And it was the last with the classic, the full classic 5-piece lineup. So yeah, just a fine album.
Nice. At number 19 is an album you've heard me talk about on this show a lot. Most recently, actually, when we talked about our favorite album covers. This is the Cults. I believe this is their 3rd album, produced by Rick Rubin. This one came out in the spring of 1987. It's the Cults Electric album. So I won't talk about too much about this one because you've seen me go on and on about how much I love the artwork. I have all of the singles, Love Removal Machine, I have the one for Lil Devil, and I have the 12-inch vinyl for Wildflower as well. So the basic story on the Cult Electric, if you're not familiar, the Cult went into the studios at the Manor. They called this the Manor Sessions back in 1986. And they produced this entire album with Steve Brown. They did 12 tracks at the Manor Studios. And after they came out, the album was finished. They realized that they were fairly happy with some of the songs, but they just really didn't like the sound of the album. It still had that kind of reverby, washy sound like the previous album, Love. So they turned to producer Rick Rubin to rework this album. And they removed some of the tracks and changed the order of them. And basically, Rick was like, let's get to the essence of these songs. A lot of them, like if you listen to the original versions, when I'm talking about original versions, they actually put out a CD a while ago called Electric Peace, which has the original Electric album on one side and the Peace album, which was originally going to be called Peace, on the other side. And so a lot of the songs had almost too many riffs going on and too much reverb. And Rick basically told them, you know, sit down and listen to AC/DC and see how they do it. And if you really want to break in the US, this is the way to go. And so that's what they did. And they came out with this album, and it reached actually number 38 on the Billboard Top 200. So, and that, as far as ranking goes, that was my number 3 album of 1987. So it was huge. Here in Canada, I know it was huge all over the world. It went platinum in the States. It actually went double platinum. So the Cult have always been hugely popular here in Canada.
The one thing Rick Rubin should have done on this album is not allowed them to record Born to Be Wild. That is just god awful. Oh my goodness.
I don't mind it for, you know, when it came out, I was young. I hadn't heard that song so much, but now I think I have 4 or 5 different bands covering that song, and
Not good.
Yeah. Sure. Moving on to did anyone else actually want to say anything about the cult? But yeah, moving on to number 18, we're going to hear from Jex. And this is Anthrax's Living. Jex rated this one as his #1 album of 1987. Actually, Andy high too at #5. So, Jex, what do you want to say about Anthrax Among the Living?
This is thrash metal perfection. This is one of my favorite thrash metal albums of all time. When we started talking about 1987, I already knew this was my #1. I had the hardest time ranking, as you guys know, but this never moved from the #1 slot the whole time. I just think it's great. It's heavy, but it's also catchy. The songs will stay in your head for a long time. The band was really, they were really gelling well at this point. You know, the musicianship is through the roof. I think they were pretty much at the top of their game at this point. I was late to Anthrax. I think I discovered them like 2007 or so. I had a buddy, Sean, who was really, really into Anthrax. He would play them, and I started to be like, "Hey, who's this? This is good." And Will, actually, you might appreciate this. There was a little game that was all the rage in 2007, a video game called Guitar Hero, and it was at Sean's place. And Caught in a Mosh is on there, Guitar Hero, and we must have played it. Oh, it must have been at least 5 times trying to get it just right. And now every time I hear Caught in a Mosh, I could see the Guitar Hero screen and all the little colors and the dots, the buttons. I'm like, I could still see it, but I still love that song. The title track, the opener, Among the Living, it just opens it so perfectly with that slow, like ding, 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 ding. It's, I get chills just talking about it. I love this album so much. Indians. It's funny, for me, I can't not hear the similarity between Rush, Passage to Bangkok, down, down, da da down, 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 da da down. It's like, because I heard this song first, and then a buddy introduced me to Rush a couple years later, and we're listening to 2112. Passage to Bangkok comes on, and I'm like, that sounds like Indians, but obviously Rush did it first. But I cannot hear the similarities now. But I think that's pretty much all I have to say. I really, really like this album. Anthrax is one of my favorite metal bands. So this is one of my prized possessions, the only Anthrax I have on vinyl. And I took a chance, and I traveled it here today, a 3-hour drive, and I debated it, but I brought it because I had to show it off. So that's all I have to say. Oh, what cool.
Form. Mine came with the actual order form for t-shirt.
That's cool. I don't have that.
So
That's
I was
awesome.
I was lucky enough when I picked this up. I think I picked this up at the Second Spin in Fredericton, and it came with. I Am the Law is my on this one, Jax.
Was that?
I Am the Law is my favorite track from this album.
That's a good one.
NFL, Skeleton in the Closet, all good. Great album.
Moving on to number 17, talking about some more CanCon here. And I'm actually kind of surprised I'm going to be the champion for this album because I really only kind of discovered this one within the last 10 years. We're talking about Loverboy's Wild Side album. Tim and Will actually rated this one just close to their 20. Tim rated it at number 20. Will had it at 21. And I was kind of surprised I rated it highest at number 14. I just started collecting Loverboy vinyl not that long ago. So this one kicks off with, Tim introduced me to this song with the video Notorious. Tim, wasn't that song written by John Bon Jovi, partially, and Richie Sambora?
John and Richie co-wrote it, and I think it was pretty much intact, but then like I think Mike Reno and Paul Dean had to stick their names on it, but you can tell listening to it, it's a total Bon Jovi, Senorita, Solitaire, like it's total Bon Jovi. Great song. And when we saw them in concert, they opened with this.
Right. Something I wanted to mention, this was their 5th album from September of 1987. Again, with the bonus tracks, I don't have it on my vinyl, but apparently there's a bonus track called Don't Keep Me in the Dark, which is kind of like a twinkly piano ballad, one of the longest songs on the album. I actually really like that tune. Listen to it on Spotify. We were talking about the video.
Yeah.
For the most gorgeous women you've ever seen in a video. And, the guy's just kind of really infatuated with all these women. The reason I'm bringing it up, the video was directed by David Fincher. He's a really famous director who went on to, he did videos for Madonna, and he did the Vogue video. He made his directorial debut with, and then the Aliens franchise, Alien 3. But you'll probably know David Fincher through the movies Fight Club, The Social Network. He did Gone Girl. So one of my favorite songs on this album is That's Where My Money Goes, track 9. It kind of opens in this, I wrote it down as a pretentious British voice. You hear him in the background kind of calling. It's like, Mr. Reno, yes, your new Jaguar your girlfriend ordered. It's in. With the new paint that comes to 42,000 pounds. So this song is kind of all about person that he's with spending all his cash. So anyway,
And by the way, that British gentleman is Paul Hyde.
okay.
So this album, yeah, this was the 5th Loverboy album. It was their first album that didn't go platinum in the States. It kind of, for some of these bands, it just isn't their time anymore. It still went gold, and Notorious was a minor top 40 single. And this actually reunited them with the dream team of Bruce Fairbairn and Bob Rock, who produced their first 2 albums. And those are the 2 albums that made those 2 known as the production duo. But the funny thing is that this is the first Loverboy album to actually have that patented Vancouver, loading bay drum sound, that huge sound that Bon Jovi, made millions off of, and Honeymoon Suite had it on The Big Prize. But it's the only Loverboy album to actually have it. And the fun story behind this album for me, I got this cassette originally in summer of 1988 when I was didn't want to sit around the house. So my mother and my grandmother, my aunt, and my sister, we all piled in the car and we drove down to St. Stephen to tour what was then the still active Ganong Chocolate Factory. And of course, on one of these trips, I didn't have a lot of tapes at this point, but I really wanted to get a tape that day. And it just so happens, and I don't know how I sniffed these places out. Matt might remember this. And if my memory serves correctly, it was downtown St. Stephen. I think it might be in the very same building where High Tides was originally, on that side of the street. A record store had literally just opened up. They had like homemade signs up. And the only tape that I could find that I didn't have that I wanted was Wild Side. So I actually bought that at this. I have no idea how long this store lasted, but it was just opening up in summer of '88. Matt might remember more about it, but that's my enduring memory of the Wild Side album.
Right on. We're going to move on to number 16 now, and I was kind of surprised by this one. We're going to hear from Andy. I thought I was going to rank this highest, but actually Andy rated Faith No More's Introduce Yourself.
So I was
at
late.
number 7.
I was late to the party on this one. I was into Faith No More when The Real Thing came out. Saw the video for We Care a Lot on Much Music after that. So that was the only track I knew from this album up until a few years ago when I think I picked this up at a thrift store for a couple of bucks. But I really love the funkiness of this album. The bass is incredible. The drums, very reminiscent of what the Chili Peppers would have been doing around 1987. And Song is a particular favorite on this one, along with, of course, We Care a Lot, and the title track, Introduce Yourself. This would be the last one with Chuck Mosley on lead vocals before Mike Patton took over. From what I've read, and I can see where the criticism comes from, a lot of people don't like his kind of out-of-tune vocal style, and I get it, but it kind of all meshes in with what they're doing, and really love this album.
Awesome, Andy. That's really, you can hear I remember Mike Patton talking about, so he's tried to play some of the older Chuck Mosley songs live, and he kind of made a little snide remark about their first album. He called it some weird kind of hippie music. But with this second album, they really did have the sound down. It just didn't have the familiar Mike Patton.
Right.
Voice, so
yeah, I think they recorded We Care a Lot on their '85 album, and they re-recorded it for this for this one.
So guys, we're actually halfway there. We're all the way up to number 15. We're going to Tim on this one. At number 15, Tim rated this at 16. And this is Twisted Sister's album, Love is for Suckers. I think that's a hard one to find on vinyl and probably CD.
It's a hard one nowadays. It's hard to find on anything. I have a German Atlantic CD of it. And I actually bought it one time that I was in Montreal when a bunch of us went in 96 to see Kiss in Montreal. Had the most glorious hall at the HMV in Montreal. And this was one of the albums I bought. So when you see a CD that's got that exclamation mark sticker, that is a Warner Group import. So the original US Atlantic CD would have looked similar. It just wouldn't have had quite so many numbers here. But yeah, this album actually was meant to be a Dee Snider solo album. And so a lot of the criticism that, oh, they went all pop, they went all, hair metal, and it wasn't meant to be a Twisted Sister album, but probably at the last minute, Atlantic said, look, you got to put the Twisted Sister name on this. So I really don't think that the band played much on this. The guitars are much more sophisticated. A guy named Ronnie Letecro, who was the guitar player from the Swedish band TNT, plays on this album, as does a guy named Reb Beach, who we would come to know. Background vocals by a guy named Kip Winger. The album was produced by Beau Hill. You see something developing here. And the really, I think the only single that came off this album, the only video, great tune, Hot Love, probably would have been a hit if it didn't have the Twisted Sister name on it. It probably held them back, but great, up-tempo pop metal song. And you can distinctly hear Kip Winger the end shouting, "Think I'll go mad." It's definitely Kip, but nobody knew who he was, right? And a couple of weird things about this album, other than the fact that I don't think the guys actually played on it. It came out, it was not successful. It was a total bomb. And I think within 2 months, they'd started to go on tour. Within 2 months, they broke up. Like the band split. So much animosity, especially towards Dee from the rest of the band, because he had all the songwriting. But a couple of fun little trivia notes about this album that I found out, and I think it's the Full In Bloom YouTube channel, that does a lot of cool interviews. There's an interview with Beau Hill, so he's talking about a lot of Rat, producing all those Rat albums, but he talked about producing this album and then producing the first couple Warrant albums. So apparently the opening scream at the very beginning of Cherry Pie, that's Dee from one of the tracks on this album. Because Janie just doesn't have that rasp, or didn't have that rasp, right? And the other part that I thought was really cool, for those of you that know the title song, Love is for Suckers, right before the chorus, it stops right up and then a cappella, is for suckers. Apparently that's Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
That does the is for suckers. And you listen to it and you go, of course it is. So Beau Hill produced Constrictor too. So it's all of these things that converge. I really like the album. There's some songs that haven't aged as well as others, but it's a fun poppy hard rock album. Really doesn't belong having the Twisted Sister name on it, but Dee sings the hell out of these songs. Like, he sounds amazing on here. Favorite song probably will always be the opening track, Wake Up the Sleeping Giant, which I think is the only song from this album that the band, when they reunited, has ever done live. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Did anyone else have anything to add about Twisted Sister's Love is for Suckers? Has anyone else been able to find a copy of that one?
I used to have a copy on vinyl, and I did a little purge a few years ago, and that was one of them I got rid of. I just could never see me putting it on the turntable. I kind of wish I still had it and hadn't gotten rid of it, because it's not easy to find for sure.
Yeah. Number 14 is a band that Tim is always going to champion here on the TVC. Tim actually rated this as his number 4 album of 1987. Of course, we're talking about Y&T and their Contagious album.
Imagine me talking about Y&T. So yeah, this is the 19 right on. Jex has himself an American copy. Mine happens to be a Canadian one, which is a little less common. This is a Hugh Syme album cover, by the way. Has that classy look to it. I love the way the logo looks on here. Yeah, this was their first of the 2 albums they did on Geffen Records, and John Kolodner, the A&R guru who resurrected a couple other bands that we haven't gotten to yet, really figured that this was going to be the time that Y&T broke big. Total image makeover, as you could see the picture that Jack's holding up. This is the first one. Jimmy DeGrasso's on drums. Leonard Hayes had left, although he did record some of the demos of these songs. To me, if you're into this period of 1987 of hard rock, no, you don't need to know anything about the history of Y&T, but if you listen to the song Contagious, I don't know how you could walk away from that not bobbing your head and going, yeah, that's good. It's total, whoa, like it's a total Bon Jovi, like gang chorus. To me, it should have been a slam dunk summertime, no pun intended, hit single that year in 1987, and it wasn't. It got buried. It had the misfortune of coming out in a period where Geffen was spending an awful lot of money producing or promoting another couple of albums, both of which we're going to get to, I'm sure. But there really wasn't anything else on this album that I think could have been a single, although I think there are some good songs on here. It is a little bit dated. I've never been too crazy about Kevin Beamish's production on here, but there are some good songs and, great vocals from Meniketti. And yeah, it's not my favorite Y&T album, but they are one of my favorite bands. So yeah, you're going to see them pop up on these year lists when they put an album out that year. That's just how it is.
Number 13 is the third studio album by Great White. This is kind of a pair of albums that they put out in 87 and 89. The first one, of course, being Once Bitten. And this has just got some killer songs. Tim Love, Lady Red Light. It's kind of funny. Tim always comments on how the
I hate it. I hate it. How can you read that?
was produced by Alan Niven. It's their third studio album for Capitol Records. Was the last one to feature Lauren Black on bass. Something I didn't realize until I did some research on this album. Apparently on the UK version of Once Bitten, so you've got the first 4 songs are the exact same as our domestic version. And then the other 4 songs on side 2, they replaced those and put on songs from a previous album, Shot in the Dark, and then a live version of the song, What Do You Do? I thought that was kind of a curious choice. But yeah, anyway, Great White's Once Bitten. I rated that at number 6. And actually, Andy, I think that cracked your top 10 as well. Did you have anything to say about Once Bitten?
I wasn't into this album when it came out in 87. I didn't get into them until Once Bitten, or Once Bitten, Twice Shy. That song came out. And I saw them with Alice Cooper at the Aiken Center. But then I went back and revisited that, and it's just a solid Great White album.
Awesome. Did anyone else want to say anything about Great White?
Well, I too was not into that band, and I still wasn't into them when Once Bitten Twice Shy came out. I actually hated that song. And it was many, many years before I owned anything by Great White. And I always thought of them as having, even though I'd always liked Rock Me, which was the big song from Once Bitten, I always liked that song. But I always thought that they had this bluesy, I thought all they did was like the bluesy stuff, right? And I didn't realize when I listened to this album, they've got keyboards, they've got it's really good commercial sounding hard rock. And I mean, at his peak, Jack Russell was such a good hard rock vocalist, right? It's really a shame that those guys can't mend fences, because they've been through so many singers. Although I will say that Mark Kendall's current version of it, the guy they've got singing for him at least this week, is a pretty good singer. But I mean, yeah. But yeah, a good album. Lady Red Light is great. Save Your Love is probably the second best known song on here. It's a ballad, and I think it hit the top 100, as did Rock Me. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised when I heard this album. Like, okay, I didn't think they did stuff like this, but I like this. I like to hear more of this. I'm guessing, Matt, that in the case of that UK version, maybe Shot in the Dark was never released in the UK at that time. So they were, I don't know, that is kind of weird, but.
Usually
Go ahead, Will.
Usually when we do these rankings and I see Great White, I just get rid of them, because I think I've said it before. I'm not a big Great White fan and never have been. And I really like Once Bitten Twice Shy, the song, and I love that song. And then I bought the greatest hits, because that's how I got into music in like 2013, 2014, was just buy the greatest hits. And if I liked it, start buying albums. Didn't like it. There wasn't too much that stuck out. But when we were doing this video, I wanted to listen to it again and give it a shot. I actually had it ranked at number 10, which is not at all what I was expecting. And it's just a solid rock album. And it's the first time that I listened further than like that bluesy and like the bluesy sound, and actually started listening to the guitar and the vocals and trying to appreciate it more. And I did with this album. Whether that'll carry to other Great White albums, it's not looking good, but at least for this album, I really like it as a rock album.
Well, try Psycho City. You might like that one.
Before we move on to the next one on our list, I did want to mention actually, a friend of mine, James, picked this up for me. I initially kind of passed on this one. So it's Jack Russell's version of Great White. This is Once Bitten Acoustic Bites. And I wrongly assumed that this was Jack just recording some live versions and of different Great White songs, but it's actually the entire Once Bitten album from start to finish, redone acoustically. And this is a lot of fun. If you can find a copy of this, it's like having almost like a kitchen party with Great White, doing that album front to back acoustically. So that was our number 13, Great White. Moving on to number 12. I won't talk about this one too much because again, I've mentioned this so many times. I can get it out here. Number 12 is INXS's album Kick, and I rated this at number 2. Tim had this one at number 6. I have so many versions of this. I can't show you my actual vinyl because it's up on my wall. But my friend James sent me this really cool picture disc of Kick. And of course I have, just to show off a little bit, I do have all of the singles on vinyl as well. So this is Never Tear Us Apart. Thanks, Andy. There's Devil Inside on 12-inch vinyl. One I just found not too long ago was New Sensation. And then I think probably the biggest hit, maybe the second biggest hit, is Need You Tonight. Have that one on vinyl as well. Did anyone else have anything to say about INXS? I know Tim, you ranked this at number 6. Andy had it just barely into his top 10.
I bought, well, not this very cassette, but one that looked like it. When my family and I road tripped in summer '88, and the one time I've been farther into the States than Maine, we actually went to New Hampshire, and this is the tape that I bought on that trip. So I listened to it a lot when we went to Santa's Village and climbed to Mount Washington. And yeah, I mean, this is one of those albums, basically half the album was a hit. It's just a great album from start to finish. It's, probably what their defining moment, Matt. I mean, and the funny thing about this album is that Atlantic Records didn't like it when they first heard it, which is crazy.
Yeah, I should have mentioned the record company actually offered the band, after they heard the album was finished, they heard it, the record company offered them $1 million to go back into the studio and re-record it. I mean, talk about completely missing the point there. So it was through the support of actually a lot of college radio stations. They got this album out to them, presumably sending them like the singles, and yeah, and then it just broke really big. It's one of those albums too. I don't think it was huge right in 1987. It took a little bit of
This is a band and an album I just do not get why anybody likes them. I can't get into them. I've tried. I tried before. I tried for this list.
Where's that mute button?
I can't. I don't know. I don't get it at all.
Will, are you telling me when Need You Tonight comes on, you don't want to break it to ba, ba, ba,
I shut it off. I can't. I don't understand it whatsoever. I shut it off and I just can't do it at all.
Well, that mystifies me.
We're almost into our top 10 here. Here's a really popular album. A bunch of us rated this actually within our top 5. We're going to hear from Will, though, because he rated this. Actually, sorry, my mistake. We are going to hear from Will, but a bunch of us rated this one really high. This is Guns N' Roses with Appetite for Destruction. Will rated
Boy,
this.
I bet Tim rated this right at the top.
Yeah, it didn't even make Tim's list. Not surprised.
That's what I figured. So, Appetite for Destruction, obviously a debut album for Guns N' Roses. Peaked at number 1 in the US and has sold 30 million copies worldwide, approximately. I think It's So Easy and Mr. Brownstone were released as singles in the UK first. And then obviously Welcome to the Jungle, Sweet Child of Mine, and Paradise City, which all did quite well. Sweet Child of Mine is one of those songs that I could do without. It's become one of those that always has been. But the rest of the album for me is pretty perfect. As somebody who didn't get into Guns N' Roses until I got into Slash's solo stuff and then had to come back to Guns N' Roses, this album for me, I listened to a ton at the gym more so because it's hard to listen to like
In
Kiss,
excess.
80s Kiss or In Excess at the gym or something. So this album I listened to a ton. Rocket Queen is probably my favorite Guns N' Roses song. Mr. Brownstone, My Michelle, I love. Obviously, when the album opens with Welcome to the Jungle, it's just gonna kick off any album a great way. So, yeah, this is my number 3, I believe. It's an excellent album.
Over to Andy, because I actually just realized he rated this as his number 1 album, 87. Right.
So
Andy, you've got this on every format available.
On, vinyl, CD, and this is the original cassette I bought in 1987. So in 1987, I would have a paper route, and my paper route consisted of 2 parts. I would reload halfway through, and this album was actually perfect for getting me around both parts of my paper route. So when I went home to load up my paper bag, I was flipping the cassette on my Walkman, and it ended at Rocket Queen when I finished the second part. So this, not only is this my number 1 album of 1987, this is my favorite album of all time by far. I just love the album. Like Will said, I think it's a perfect rock album.
There's some songs that could have been on this album. Don't Cry, November Rain. Yeah. I kind of wonder how that album would have sounded if they'd really loaded it up. But they've too much.
They've talked about that and how the songs, they knew they were good songs, they just didn't fit on this album. They had the kind of the rhythm going of each side, and they just didn't fit in. So yeah, they were definitely written. And another one that was written that didn't come out until later, Shadow of Your Love, which definitely fits in with kind of the tone of this album.
Yeah, but November Rain on this album would have I love November Rain, but it would have ruined it. It wouldn't have fit at all.
So, anybody that's watched TVC for, over the years, they may be seeing that, the GNR is like the elephant in the room. Why has there never been a GNR episode? Honestly, I just never got on board with this band. And I do recognize, I do recognize this is a good album. There are good songs on here. I was never the biggest Axl fan you could take that any way you like. I just never the biggest Axl fan, but I recognize there are good songs on here. And Sweet Child of Mine, I need never hear again. Like, it's just been played so much. I mean, probably one of the heaviest songs ever to be a number 1 pop hit on Billboard. But oddly enough, in the summer of '89, they put out Night Train as a single, and it actually hit like number 94 or something like that. But because it was just probably the only other song that they could have, although I have to say, as someone who has heard the album, I'm really surprised they didn't go with Think About You as a single, because that's almost poppy for them, right? Really surprised they didn't put that out as a single and see what happens. But yeah, obviously a classic album, and what do I know? So
I will say, oh, sorry, just one more thing. On Slash's live album that he did with Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, I think it's the Live at the Roxy show. He did like a 16 or 17 minute version of Rocket Queen, and it's unbelievable. And that, I think, is really what told me to go listen to Guns N' Roses. Is this, I hate to say, the stuff that Miles Kennedy sang is what made me go back and listen to Guns N' Roses, but that's how it happened, and that's an excellent version of the song.
No, real quick, I was just gonna say that Tim and I are very much in the same boat. I've never really gotten into Guns N' Roses. Can't really stand Axl or his voice or anything like that. But this is the only album I have by them because it is a good album. I like it, and because like there's no denying it's a rock classic, right? But like Welcome to the Jungle, if I hear it on the radio, oh, this is overplayed. I've heard it too many times. But if I put on the album, it comes on, different story. Because within the context of the album and the flow of the songs coming up after it, it changes everything. Like I don't mind it within the album. Night Train is great. It's So Easy is probably my favorite track. But yeah, not Guns N' Roses fans per se, but I do really think this is a good album.
Awesome. So guys, we've cracked our top 10. And for these next two, we're actually going to hear from Tim. Starting with number 10 is Rush's album Hold Your Fire. Will rated this one pretty high too. He rated it number 9. But Tim's got Rush's Hold Your Fire at number 5.
So this would have been the album that came out right when I was getting into the band, like just soaking everything up. I didn't own it till about March of '88. Actually, I bought it in Riverview on a family trip. It's some little strip mall, and I'm curious to know where it actually was now because it's long gone. But it was the first Rush album, obviously, that I bought when it was current. It's not one of my favorites, but I do like it. It was heavy, and this is like full on into their heavy synth period. But I have, probably from doing all the forums on Rush fans, a lot of people swear by this album. So I've listened to it a lot in the last couple of years, and I really do think it's quite good. I love the opener, Force 10. That's one of my favorites on the album. The best known song is the single Time Stand Still, which features Amy Mann Till Tuesday on the background vocals. I think that Open Secrets is a deeper cut that I've always liked on this one. Lock and Key is a great song. Yeah, it's this is one of the oldest cassettes in my collection, and it's actually been taken apart and glued back together, courtesy of my buddy John, because it wound up, and he used to be pretty good at taking things apart and gluing them back together. But yeah, I don't know where I'd rank it as far as their albums go, but it is the album that was out when I was just getting way, way into this band and buying everything that I could find by them.
This is my favorite Rush album post Moving Pictures, actually. Probably when I listen, anything that's post Moving Pictures, it's the one I grab for the most. Time Stands Still, I still love that song, always have. Force 10 obviously is a great song, but the album's just solid the whole way through. And Geddy's vocals on some of the songs is just unbelievable, as most albums, but this one in particular, there's some songs that he can just scream them out.
Going to number 9, I'm actually surprised. Some more CanCon. This one actually rated just above Rush. This is Helix with their Wild in the Streets album. Will rated this 19. We're all kind of in the 1920s. Tim rated this as number 2 album of 1987. Helix, Wild in the Streets.
I love this album. I always have. I think Back for Another Taste is my favorite, but this is right behind it. I love both of those albums so much. I actually don't have the original Canadian cassette. This is actually a US cassette, but the original Canadian cassette, some of you may remember, was like white and it like glowed in the dark, which is kind of cool. I never had that one. I just had a regular black one. This is the US one. So this album was their last on Capitol worldwide. It went gold in Canada, but that was about it for success. A lot of songs on here I've come to realize were not written by members of the band, but I really like how they do them. Second single on this album is a great ballad called Dream On, nothing to do with the Aerosmith song. It's actually the cover of a Nazareth song, which had come out 5 years previous to this. And the version that Helix does is just about identical to the Nazareth version. It's like you could, if you were at a party and someone put it on in the background, you might not realize it wasn't Helix or vice versa. They're very, very close, very, very faithful. But I remember, like, I always loved this album. I first heard it like in '88 and listened to it all the time. But I remember actually one time listening to it. And one of my favorite songs on this album was a song called She's Too Tough. And I just get into that song. So then one day I'm actually looking at the liner notes, and I read that She's Too Tough is written by someone named Jay Elliott, and it's published like Zomba Music Publishing. So it's like, this is practically a Def Leppard song. How did Helix end up recording it? And of course, it would have been, it ended up being a Def Leppard song, but Helix recorded it first. Hot take, I like Helix's version better. Maybe it's because it's the one I've been familiar with the longest, but I've had the pleasure of interviewing Brian Vollmer back in 2009. Super nice guy. And I asked him about how he came to record it. Said they were short material for the album, and this song came to them, and he said that he had a hard time singing it because it was quite high. But Wild the Streets, just a good, solid rockin'. I mean, Helix are pretty dependable. They're like the Rat of Canada. Like, you're just pretty much going to get a good album. But this is my second favorite from them. And yeah, I knew this was going to place maybe surprisingly quite high on my list for 87.
She's Too Tough is such a great song, but I like Def Leppard's version more. But it is a great song. And that album is a solid album. I just haven't got big into Helix. I was more the Honeymoon Suite side of things than the Helix side. But the album is just a solid rock album, like Tim said.
You want a good introduction to Helix, Will? Check out the Over 60 Minutes With CD. That's everything you need, basically.
Well, I wouldn't say that. But no, it is a good solid best of, yes.
Yeah.
And to Will's point, and we've talked about this a lot, it's hard to find these CDs by some of these Canadian bands.
Oh, impossible. And then if you go on the Helix website, which is a great place to find them all, they're expensive. But what can you do?
Moving on to number 8. This one is actually, for me, the biggest surprise how high this one ranked. It ranked so high because, so Alice Cooper's Raise Your Fist and Yell. It ranked so high because every single one of us ranked it within our top 20. I had it at number 20. Tim had it at 19. Will had it at 18. But here we have Andy. He ranked this one at number 11. Raise Your Fist and Yell.
So produced by Michael Wagner. This was kind of on Alice's comeback along with Constrictor. Freedom was the single from this album. Kip Winger on bass.
Oh yeah.
The last album featuring Kip Winger, and the only album featuring Ken K. Mary on drums. He would go on to play in House of Lords after this. And a lot of the songs on this album start with a nice 5-second drum kind of, if you listen to them, there's a lot of them that have a nice drum fill to start. What I've never understood is why they have the lyrics on the back of the album. You don't see that very often.
Yeah.
Really cool. I guess maybe the color matching didn't work and they didn't put this on the back of the album. They just decided to put the lyrics on. But my introduction to this album was in grade 8. I was buying a cassette from a classmate of mine, which was Too Fast for Love was the cassette I was buying. And the day I bought it from him, he said, well, I got this other cassette. You want to buy that one too? And it was this album. And I looked at the cover and said, yeah, I want to buy that album. How can you not love that cover? I think it was done by Jimmy Warren was his name, Jim Warren. So Alice Cooper, Raise Your Fist and Yell.
Did anyone else want to add anything to Alice Cooper?
Speaking of lyrics, the printing inside of the cassette is about the smallest printing ever. I must have been able to read it years ago, or one's stuff this small, but man, that's minuscule. I just real quick about this album, I'll turn it over to Jax. Of his 2 MCA albums in this period, I think that this is the better one. It's the better sounding one. I like Michael Wagner's production on this better than Beau Hill's production on Constrictor. Constrictor is very slick. I think Not That Kind of Love is great. Roses on White Lace is a great song. Prince of Darkness is really good. This was still in his extra bloody horror period. Actually, the Prince of Darkness is actually a movie called Prince of Darkness, which I think Alice has a little cameo in. And the only other thing I'll say about it is that if you look at the cover of Alice's next album, Trash, he's got this cover, I think, on his t-shirt that he's wearing.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm just gonna say this real quick. Being a horror movie fan, I was pretty pleased to hear the voice of Robert Englund, aka Freddy Krueger himself, on the song "Lock Me Up." He's the one that says, "Alice Cooper, you've been accused of mass mental cruelty. How do you plead?" "Not guilty." I thought that was kind of cool. That's all I wanted to say. But I think everyone else covered it. Like Tim, I think it's a little better than Constrictor. I like Constrictor a lot. This one is just a little heavier, which I dig for sure.
Number 7 is another one that completely surprised me. Again, everyone ranked this one fairly high. We're going to hear from Jex on this one, though. At number 7, we have Ace Frehley, Ace Comet. Tim ranked this number 2, Will 11. I had it 22 as well. Jex rated this at number 9. Just cracked his top
10. Yeah, it's just this is just a straight up great. It's a great rock album, solid rock album. Not much else to add. This is Ace Frehley's first solo effort after leaving Kiss, because apparently, I forget the details, some sort of contractual obligations. He wasn't allowed to release anything solo before '85, and then for some reason it took 2 years, and then he finally released this. But it was a long time coming, and I think it was worth the wait. It's we'll just find my notes here. It's pure Ace. Great guitar playing. His vocals are good. He recruited frequent Kiss collaborator Anton Fig to take up drum duties. So it's a lot of familiar ground, which I think is fun. And my favorites are probably Breakout, Into the Night, and Love Me Right. It's yeah, that's all I really had to say. Nothing more than that. It's a great rock album.
I remember listening to this album. Obviously, I listened to Revenge first. That was like the third Kiss album I had on CD. So then I listened to this and Breakout, which is just Car Jam with lyrics on it, but 5 years earlier. But it is just a really good album. Obviously, Ace throws in a lot of the Ace references and the card decks and that type of stuff. But I mean, he still does that now. This is pretty much where my joy of Ace albums starts and ends for the most part. But it is a really good album. So,
but Trouble Walking, man, you don't like that?
It's not this, but it is what it
is. It's interesting. Ace is the only guy I bothered with any of the solo stuff of the Kiss guys. And that's not to say I think his albums are all wonderful, because they aren't. There's peaks and valleys, but this one's probably one of his best. I got to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Todd Howarth's vocals. I'm not crazy about his vocals on some of the songs. Although I do think there are some good songs that he sings. Obviously, Breakout, they turned that into a cool song. Something Moved is a great song. Heavy. I really like Into the Night. Into the Night was another Russ Ballard song, who obviously he wrote God Gave Rock and Roll. He wrote New York Groove and a lot of other songs for a lot of other people. But Into the Night was the closest thing that Ace ever had to a solo hit from this period, not counting New York Groove. I think it's a really cool melodic rock song. I think Ace sings it really well. I think his vocals are really quite good on this album, and his guitar playing is amazing. He obviously was in pretty good shape. Rock Soldiers, I think maybe it's a little bit. I understand it was this personal thing for Ace, talking about again getting clean after his accident. It's a little bit cheesy, but it's fun. It's cheesy Ace fun. I think We Got Your Rock could have been a Kiss song. I actually think Gene could have sang it, but I actually think side 1 is way superior to side 2. Does anyone here actually like the song Dolls?
No.
I kind of like it for what it is, but if I had to listen to it, I'm not gonna.
I think it's terrible. I think it's terrible. Like, it's a really, like, it's weird. It's out of place. Anyway, if anybody really liked it, I was going to shut up, but I don't like it at all. Another thing, Will mentioned Breakout 5 years later becoming Car Jam. Well, the other way around, the song Calling to You on side 2 was actually originally recorded 5 years previous to this in 1982 with a band called 707, Todd Howarth was then a member of that band, and they did a song called Megaforce, which is from a movie called Megaforce. And it's the same song as Calling to You. There's just a few rewritten lyrics. So it's a little bit of trivia there. And Ace, of course, has to do his Fractured something or other because he had Fractured Mirror on his first album. So this has Fractured 2 as an instrumental, which whatever. But yeah, a decent album. I think this almost went gold, and you know, it's a good enough album. I mean, honestly, there's no more peaks and valleys in this. It's some of the Kiss albums from the similar period. So,
And they mostly sound like they're in tune on the album, which is
well, that's because
Well,
Richie Scarlett's not on it.
more than you can say for what they sound like live once in a while.
Again, that's Richie Scarlett. The guy's never learned how to tune his guitar.
All right,
Yeah.
moving on. So we've almost cracked our top 5, and this one is actually number 6 is going to show us the power of voting. Tim's going to take over for this one. Tim rated this as his number 1 album of 1987. Will rated it as second, and I also rated it as my favorite album of 1987. Andy's got it at number 2. However, Mr. Jax, Jax is not a fan of this album at all. So push this one down to number 6. It's so far low on Jax's ratings, it's literally not even there. This is, of course, Def Leppard's album Hysteria.
Well, I don't know what more I can say about this. I mean, Matt and I have both at different times called this our favorite album of all time. And I listened to it yesterday. I listened to the deluxe version. I still really like it. Although oddly enough, people can get mad at me for this. I doubt they will. I skipped Love Bites and Pour Some Sugar on Me. Maybe I've heard them too much. Don't know. I really like some of the deeper cuts on side 2, like Gods of War and Run Riot. And we've dedicated whole episodes to this album. I went up on the Contrarians versus Martin Popoff, who loathes this album, and I defended it as my favorite. So I'm not afraid of Jax. and I think I came out unscathed on that Contrarians episode. I understand why someone who was into the first 3 albums, was into their harder stuff, wouldn't like it. This is my introduction, although I hated it when I first heard it. I hated Animal when I first heard it, just loathed. Did not like it at all. Swore up and down I didn't like this band. And then Pour Some Sugar on Me comes out. And I was like, well, I guess I got to admit I was wrong. So whereas I listened to Bon Jovi all summer of 1987, I pretty much listened to Def Leppard all the summer of 1988. So, a lot of nostalgia, but I still really, really like this album.
Another one that took a little while to take off too, right?
Yeah.
Came out in
Oh yeah. Months, almost a year.
I was curious though, before we hear from Andy and Will, Jex, is there anything particular that you wanted to say about Hysteria as far as, what you don't like about it, or you just never?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm visiting my parents right now, so my mom's in the other room, and she always taught me that if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So that's what I'm going to do. No, I'm kidding. No disrespect, anything like that. Like, I think you guys all like the album. I think that's fine. This is what makes these interesting. Like if we all like the same stuff, it would be boring, and it's nothing personal. It just doesn't do anything for me. It's because I love those 3 first albums, like Tim said. And for me, it's just like it's too much of a shift. It's very poppy in comparison, and I can't do anything. The song Rocket is kind of cool. I don't mind that one. I will admit to that. But overall, it's just not my cup of tea. And that's it. No disrespect or nothing.
Honestly, I from the way Matt was, teasing with it, I thought it was going to be much lower, but number 6 is respectable.
I had to put this at number 2. I really wanted to put it at number 1, but it's not my favorite Def Leppard album. I think it's the greatest rock album of all time, but I love High and Dry. So, and Bad is my favorite Michael Jackson album. So I kind of had to do some sort of shifting. But I mean, Hysteria is obviously, not only do the 4 of us like it, Jax, but millions of other people in the world love this album because it's so good.
Totally. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is another one of those albums that I remember listening to when I was super young because my dad is a huge Def Leppard fan. We've seen them 4 times now. He's seen them 5.
You were there. You were there too.
I technically was there. I was told I was dancing, but I could only see black.
Yeah, your mother. Yeah, I remember your mother saying you were kicking.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's not much I can say. Like Tim said, we've talked about this album a lot. If I'm gonna listen to the album though, I won't skip any songs because I do think that it works. I do love the album from start to finish. If I'm just listening to Def Leppard on a road trip and it's a bunch of, I'll skip Love Bites, but Pour Some Sugar on Me, I don't really get tired of either. So
I was really into Pyromania when it first came out. I bought that in Florida when we were on a family trip in '83 or '84. And I bought this on cassette when it first came out, and I really liked it, especially some of the deeper tracks, like Tim mentioned, Excitable, Gods of War, Don't Shoot Shotgun. And then it kind of didn't break like I thought it was going to. So I just kind of put it back in my cassette bin, and then it kind of just blew up after that. And,
Actually, you're the first person that I've ever come talk to, Andy, that bought it before Pour Some Sugar on Me, that bought it when it first came out. That's really cool.
high expectations for it because like it had been 4 years since I had gotten my hands on Pyromania, and high expectations. And then I thought, okay, well, they've just kind of faded away, and we all know they didn't.
I still kind of laugh when you guys say the deep tracks of Hysteria, because are there really any? I mean,
Well,
Def Leppard they still play or could play at any given night any of the songs on the album. And they obviously play a pile of them. But yeah, the album's just so consistent and so great.
basically the 5 songs that didn't chart anywhere.
Right. But now looking back, it's like these songs are still so good.
So on to our top 5 now, and number 5 I think is actually for me a really curious choice. Anytime through this album's existence, a lot of people absolutely despise this record. I see online now some of the music channels. I know someone from I think Michael Brandvold from Three Sides of the Coin rates this as his favorite album by Kiss. So this is Kiss's Crazy Nights, coming in at number 5. Tim rated this fairly highly at 14. I had it at 8. Jex also had it at 14.
Oh, hype sticker.
Yes.
We're going to hear from Will this one about Crazy Nights. Will rated this at number 4.
Yes, this album, I mean, talk about songs and albums I listened to when I was super young. My dad is a religious fan of Crazy Crazy Nights. The song, he gets mad every time we see them and they don't play it. He thinks that they owe us playing it for some reason, which I'd totally be on board with, because Crazy Crazy Nights is a fantastic song. It was a huge hit in the UK and Europe, I believe, and when they tour there, they still play it. They don't play it in Canada and the US because it wasn't as big of a hit here, and it's just hard for Paul to sing, which is understandable, because this, like, if you listen to this album, Paul is absolutely on fire singing on this album. Just way up there for every song. But the Gene songs are really consistent too. No 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 is one of my favorite songs on the album. Hell or High Water, Good Girl Gone Bad is a lot of fun, and I just saw a clip of Bruce Kulick's band playing that on the Kiss Cruise, which sounded really good. And Thief in the Night. Reason to Live, I believe, was the second single, which is a good 80s Kiss ballad. Then there's some of the songs that have like the fun lyrics, like Bang Bang You. I mean, I still like it as a song, but it's just some of the choices they made were just very 80s Kiss. It went platinum in the US and Canada as a record. It was their 4th album, switching from the Casablanca logo or label to the Mercury. And it was the 2nd album with my favorite Kiss lineup, with Bruce Kulick on lead guitar and Eric Carr on drums. And I think it's a fantastic album. It's probably top 10 Kiss album for me. So I absolutely love it. And the album artwork is one of my favorites as well.
I agree on the Crazy Nights. They should be playing that in every concert. Does anyone else want to add anything about Crazy Nights?
When I got into Kiss, of course, back in '93, this was not an album I thought much of, aside from Crazy Crazy Nights, which is an awesome song. In the light of day, I think a lot of the narrative on a lot of these 80s albums are the Paul songs are pretty good. Gene phoned the songs in. Now, that's a generalization. And so I think Crazy Crazy Nights is really good. I think I'll Fight Hell to Hold You should have been a single. That's a fantastic song. I think Bang Bang You is utterly ridiculous and I hate it. I don't hate it as much as Two Timer, but it's close. No, no, no. I mean, that's a great guitar showcase for Bruce, but it's kind of Gene with his mind on autopilot. Must write fast, heavy song, I think. That's a good showcase for Eric too, of course. Hell or High Water. My Way is so poppy, like keyboards galore on it. But Paul, I mean, I think this might have been his peak as a vocalist. I mean, he's like hitting ridiculous notes on here. When Your Walls Come Down. Reason to Live should have been a big hit. It was perfect for radio at the time. I think it's because it was a Kiss song. If Heart had recorded this song, it might have been a big hit. If Chicago had recorded the song, it might have been a big hit. But it's too bad. It's a well-written song. It's a Desmond Child co-write. Good Girl Gone Bad. Turn on the Night, super poppy. Diane Warren. I guess it could have been a hit for someone else. I think the best Gene song on here, and definitely his best vocal on the album, is Thief in the Night. So yeah, I like this album more than I did when I first heard it. If you bought this cassette in the US, it looks a little different on the side. It would have the yellow logo and the blue title. And I've also seen someone put together a version of this album cover with the original 4 in makeup, which kind of really looks cool with the fractured mirror. Anyway, that's all I got.
I also bought, I think it was Julian Gill. He had the Crazy Nights book out. I read that. And I know this album originally they wanted it to do right after Asylum and have it come out in 86, which I think personally this album would have been a lot bigger had it come out in 86 and not had to fight with Guns N' Roses and Def Leppard and Michael Jackson and another band we're going to talk about and these other huge albums that just all happen to come out the same year. If it came out in 86, which was a less of a strong year in my opinion, I think it would have done a lot better.
Speaking of no, Paul's picture on the no.
That one. In a number 4 now. Here's another example of the power of voting on these lists. It's an album we're going to hear about from Andy on these next 2. Actually, it's one I didn't rank very high only because I'm not super familiar with the band. But this is Dawkins' Back for the Attack in at number 4. Tim rated this fairly high at 8. Will's got it at 15. Jex had this one at number 6, but Andy, this is your 4th favorite album of 1987.
So my introduction to Dokken overall was this album. I had a neighbor who was a year older than me, he had an older brother, so I was always over there reading Hit Parader and Circus Magazine, and he had this cassette, and he decided he didn't like it, so he actually gave me the cassette, and really fell in love with some of the songs on this. The whole first side I really like. Of course, Dream Warriors was from A Nightmare on Elm Street part 3, I believe. But Prisoner of Love, Kiss of Death, Night by Night, Standing in the Shadows, all George Lynch is just ripping on this album. Surprisingly, when I looked it up, it actually hit number 13. It peaked at 13 on the Billboard 100, which kind of surprised me because I don't remember it being, kind of that big of an album, but I was 13 at the time. So what did I know?
Well, actually, this is my first time seeing the back of this cover. That's really illustrations of those dogs and what is that, crows or something at the top?
Like hawks or something. Yeah.
So the song Back for the Attack actually was recorded in 85 for the Unchained the Night. It's not on this album, even though it's called Back for the Attack. I think it was on a reissue.
Yeah, it is. It's Rock Candy. Yeah, and I have it on a Japanese best of Dokken from 94. And it was also, I should have got it out. There's a Dream Warriors cassette, Dream Warriors EP, that it was the B-side of Dream Warriors, because Dream Warriors came out quite a few months before the Back for the Attack album. I mean, this is such an odd band for so many reasons. Yeah, they sold a lot of albums. They never had any top 40 singles. So that's one of the reasons why they just didn't have that. Your average radio listener wouldn't know who they were from the 80s, even if they did listen to it. Because I don't ever remember hearing Dokken on the radio. For me, it was the Power Hour, and yeah, reading about them, Hit Parader and Circus and Metal Edge. They were always fighting. All you ever read about is Don and George fighting. And this was the last album that they did before an extended hiatus. A long album, a really long album. It's kind of like Hysteria. I think it's like 63 minutes long. It's got 13 songs on it. And I couldn't agree more with Andy. Side one, I think, is perfect. Side two, it is a little long. It does start to run out of steam a little bit. And I think Dream Warriors might be one of those songs that maybe hasn't aged so well, but it got a lot of people aware of this band, because I think somebody can back me up on this one, maybe Jex. I think that the video for that was actually on the VHS of the Nightmare on Elm Street 3 movie. So a lot of people, they might not know who the band was, but they know that song, right? Flame was the closest thing to a single, hit single off this album. Prisoners, yeah, Kiss of Death, it's good. It's a good album. I really, really like the artwork. I think it's really classy looking, looks especially good on vinyl.
All right, only 3 left to go. Here's another, just as we did with the Dokken album, here's another one that I'm really surprised got so high on our list. We're gonna hear from Andy again. This is Motley Crue's album, Girls, Girls, Girls. Tim rated this number 11. Will had this at number 6. Jex had it at number 8. And for Andy, this was your 3rd favorite album of 1987.
So this was the original cassette I bought the day it came out, May 15th, 1987, produced by Tom Warman. It would have been the last one that they, obviously they went with Bob Rock on Dr. Feelgood. Quadruple platinum in the US, double platinum in Canada. Of course, we know Girls, 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 Wild Side. But I like all the other tracks except for, of course, Jailhouse Rock, which I don't have any idea. Well, I do know why they put it on, because they were so all into addiction at that time that they had
they did well to get an album out, never mind a 10-song album.
So you got Nona, which was obviously a tribute to his grandmother. He details in, I can't remember if it's The Dirt or the Heroin Diaries,
I
that
think it's Heroin Diaries.
too messed up to go to his grandmother's funeral, so he kind of wrote this in tribute to her. And Rodeo was a song that recorded during these sessions, which I really like, and I don't know why they didn't put that on the album and they chose to put Jailhouse Rock. Tim, I'm not sure if you know the reason for that.
Drugs. And yeah, Rodeo could have been a hit. I mean, it eventually appeared on the was it Supersonic and Demonic Relics, which has got some good stuff on it, actually. But yeah, it could have been, for me, I understand the tribute that Nona was, but Rodeo's an actual song. It could have been the last song on side one very easily. And also, speaking of their slow songs, You're All I Need. I mean, I always knew that it's pretty dark. I mean, it's about a guy that, like, a over possessive boyfriend kills his girlfriend, and the video didn't get played on much music. It's pretty graphic video, body bags and the whole thing. I mean, there's only one video that much music played from this, and it's one of my favorite Crue songs ever, Wild Side. But as I love Wild Side, and it's a fun song to play the drums to. But one thing, when you read about how messed up they all were, they never put a guitar solo on this. And do you think that was on purpose, or did they just forget? I don't know. To me, I like it the way it is. But I really think it's really cool, really rhythmic. The title song, Girls, 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 pretty darn heavy song to go all the way to number 12. In 1987, that's a pretty rockin' tune. That song still to this day makes me think of towards the end of grade 7, Friday night listening to the radio, because it got a lot of radio play. What else? Yeah, it's pretty dark lyrically. I mean, Dancing on Glass, 5 Years Dead, All in the Name of. Maybe I like that song, but lyrically that's aged about as well as Christine 16, maybe worse.
Getting back to Your All I Need, I think it was in The Dirt.
Oh yeah, I was getting to this. It was in the Heroin Diaries, why he called it All I Need. Yes, go ahead.
I think Doc McGee had relayed to Nikki that John Bon Jovi had heard the song, and he couldn't believe how great of a song it was, and Nikki kind of started laughing, saying, "Does he really know what this song is about?" He thought it was kind of funny that John Bon Jovi thought it was such a great song.
Yeah, I do remember that, but that's not what I thought you were getting at. What, I can't remember who it was. It wasn't Vanity, but it was one of the girls that Nikki was dating around this time left him for Jack Wagner, or left Jack Wagner for Nikki. So Jack Wagner, of course, the actor, but he had a really big hit in the mid 80s called All I Need. So that's why Nikki wrote a song basically called All I Need, but it was a jab at Jack Wagner. I think that's in the Heroin Diaries.
Along with Hysteria and Pyromania, Dr. Feelgood is one of those albums I remember listening to, and I was super young because my dad had the CD and played it all the time. But I didn't really get into Motley Crue past that until the Dirt movie came out. I listened to like the greatest hits, and I think I might have only had the greatest hits. But after I watched the Dirt, I started getting into the albums more and liking them. And Girls, Girls, Girls wasn't an album I always liked the most. But I mean, Wild Side is a fantastic song. I really, really like 5 Years Dead. I mean, the title track is obviously really, really good. And I listened to Motley Crue a ton this summer, preparing for the Motley Crue show that I went to in August. So I listened to this album a ton for that as well. So I had to rank it high because it is good the whole way through, even though it's not one of my favorite Motley Crue albums. But I mean, Wild Side, I think, how can you not like that song as a rock fan?
Dex, did you have anything to add to Motley Crue's Girls, Girls, Girls?
Not really. I think you guys got all bases covered. I think it's a great album. It's kind of fuzzy in my brain. I haven't had a chance to re-listen to it. It's been a while, but I do know that Wild Side is such a great opener. Like as soon as you press play and that comes on, oh yes. So yeah, no, but other than that, no, I think you guys got it covered. It's a great Crue album. Probably not my favorite. My favorite probably their debut, Too Fast for Love, but it's just a great album.
Awesome, guys. We only have two albums left to talk about, but actually when I'm looking at the rankings, these last two, number 1 and 2, scored exactly the same. The big difference here is number 2 is Whitesnake's self-titled album. Jeff kind of put the damper on this one a little bit, but we're going to hear from Tim on this one. He rated it at number 3. This is Whitesnake's self-titled album from 1987.
I'm amazed at what the top 2 are. Or top 3, or top 4. I'm actually really, really surprised. This is cool. Yeah, I mean, like so many people our age that didn't grow up in the UK, I'd never heard of Whitesnake until I saw the Still of the Night video, and it was the 1-2 punch of the song and the video that I was like, this is a band. And again, I'd gotten into Bon Jovi, I'd gotten into Europe, so I was kind of really looking for bands like that. I was really revving up for that. I was just such a child of that generation, right? And I remember buying the Whitesnake cassette. I didn't buy it till early 88, but I mean, and then of course that summer, Here I Go Again in 87, it's the song of the summer. Is This Love a big hit in the winter, 87, 88. I finally ended up buying the cassette at a store called Stedman's, which only if you're in Atlantic, Canada, it's the only time I ever bought music at a Stedman's. It's just, I don't know why I remember that, but obviously it's not their first album. It was more like their eighth or ninth or something like that, but it's a completely different lineup. Coverdale has this tendency to revamp the lineup on occasion, and John Sykes plays all the guitars on here, save the solo. That's the tape. That's the actual tape I had right there. This is the US copy that I have now. But Adrian Vandenberg, of course, plays the solo on Here I Go Again, and the band in the videos, the band that's listed on the album, blah, 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 blah. So what does that leave us with? Leaves us with the album. Opens up with the remake of Crying in the Rain, which is just the heaviest blues song ever. That's my kind of blues right there. That's my kind of blues, with this epic guitar solo from John Sykes, the king of the starting his songs off like that. That's why I love the Blue Murder album so much. And I was actually watching for that to come out. That we covered that in our '89 episode. It's not my favorite, far from it. I don't think it's. I actually think I prefer the follow-up, Slip of the Tongue. But maybe that's because I was actively waiting for that one to come out. But it's definitely a good album. Really, really thick production. Mike Stone and Keith Olsen. The drums are just almost too smotheringly heavily recorded, but it works. And then this album sold like 8-9 million copies. And it's because it's kind of funny because it put Whitesnake in that big league of bands, but just because of this album, that was basically it. They didn't have the back catalog didn't sell because this album became so big. I bought the back catalog, but yeah, I don't know what more to say about it. It was a huge album. And it's my third for '87. So I'm content to talk about it as the number 2.
I debated really, really hard where to rank this album. I almost messaged the group and asked if I could make this album and Crazy Nights a tie for me. And until the day I submitted my list, I had this album at 4 and Crazy Nights at 5. So that would have made it a number 1 album. So that's how close it was for me. Mostly because Still of the Night, I think, is unbelievable. It's like the big slow part, the epic with the string instruments and the slowed down, and David Coverdale is just hitting those crazy notes. It's just unbelievable. I didn't even get introduced to Whitesnake until last summer when I messaged Tim and I'm like, what is it? You like this band, but like, why don't I like it? And then that's when I listened to this album the first time, and I absolutely love this album. Is This Love is one of my favorite ballads. Definitely my favorite of theirs. And this album is just really, really good. I really wanted to put it higher than number 5, but this was just such a strong year that I couldn't.
Does anyone else want to add anything to Whitesnake's otherwise, we're going to move on to our number 1 album. And
Do we have any honorable mentions?
we do have some on. Do you guys want to go through the honorable mentions
Yeah,
first?
let's do that.
Okay. Okay, I'll kick off with my honorable mention. Actually, just right before we go into the honorable mentions, I did want to mention we did have quite a large list. As far as bands that didn't even make our list, Pink Floyd, George Michael, we had albums from REO Speedwagon, Heart, Prince, George Harrison, Deep Purple, Foreigner, a lot of big names there that just barely didn't make the cut. For my only honorable mention, this one's definitely a nostalgic thing for me. I'm going to show you what the vinyl looks like. I don't actually own this yet. This is the Wrestling Album Volume 2. Came out in, this is actually the second soundtrack that the WWF put out back then. It was released by Epic Records. I had the original cassette for this, and they did actually re-release this album, the 2 wrestling albums. I'm still looking for it on Record Store Day in 2015. They packed the 2 of them together. So anyone happens to find that, they only made less than 3,000 copies, but I'd love to find it. Anyway, so several of the songs on Piledriver wound up as the wrestlers would actually use them as their entrance music. I don't know if anyone was really into the WWF, but Coco Beware used the Piledriver song as his entrance song. And of course, Demolition had that really heavy, here comes the axe and here comes the smasher. I loved this album when I was a kid, had it on cassette. I actually realized there's a video VHS version of this where they put all the music videos on there. So that's Piledriver, Wrestling Album 2. That's my honorable mention.
So because Tim had some stiff and rigid rules, some of my favorite albums that came out this year, we weren't able to include them. EP by Metallica, Garage Days, Revisited, a couple live albums. This would have made my top 10, Wasp, Live in the Raw. And another live album, Tribute by Ozzy Osbourne,
I had to completely redo my list to take that one out. It was really high.
and then this.
They aren't albums.
Oh, this one would have qualified.
That yes, yes, yes.
Also had this on his list. This is Rock and Roll by Motorhead.
Jex, you had some honorable mentions?
Yeah, we try to keep it no more than 3, but I was given permission to show 4 since so many of my top picks got taken out. I think this was planned for my dislike of Hysteria, but no, I'm just kidding. So my first honorable mention, 1987, Taking Over by Overkill. As you can see, I don't have this album. I would love to find it. It's so expensive online, CD or vinyl. It's so expensive. It's one of the few I'm missing of Overkill. Love this album. Great thrash. This was my introduction to Overkill years ago with the song Power Surge, which remains my favorite Overkill song to this day. If you want to know what Overkill is all about, check out that song. Also, The Wrecking Crew is another. That's still a concert staple to this day. And then keeping up with the thrash theme, Testament's debut came out in '87, The Legacy. All I'm going to say about this is check out COTLOD, which abbreviates Curse of the Legion of Death. And that song is just going to melt your face. Curse of the Legion of Death. Now, this is not thrash. We're moving over to power metal now. This is Halloween from Germany, Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1. This is just some great power metal, man. The best way I could describe this is galloping. You listen to that, you feel like you're on a horse. It's like, I wish I could listen to this on a horse with headphones. I'd be on cloud 9, man. But yeah, this is some great stuff. And lastly, I think you guys would dig this. I never hear anyone bring this band up. This is Leatherwolf. Straight up hard rock, kind of metal-ish. Kind of generic though, like I said before with the Faster Pussycat and stuff, they all kind of sounded alike. It kind of falls into that category, but they do a cover of CCR's Bad Moon Rising. And I can't not hear There's a Bathroom on the Right. I mean, you kind of hear that in the original, but more so here, there's a bathroom on the right. So, but yeah, this is, Tim, I feel like you would like Princess of Love. Check that out. It opens up with like a keyboard. It could have been on Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet, but a little amped up.
I've heard a couple of songs by them. I think they had a song, it might have been on their second album called Hideaway, which is kind of a power ballad. That was a much power hour song. I think it's on the album that came out after that. Do they also have a song called Leatherwolf, or am I getting them mixed up with some other band?
They might. I can't say for sure. I don't know a lot of their other stuff.
Yeah,
it's not on here.
I'm thinking of some other band. I have heard of them. Yeah.
Falling was a song that was pretty big by them.
Yeah, cool. That's all my honorable mentions.
My only honorable mention is Foreigner Inside Information, mostly because I just love Say You Will. But the whole album, I think, is pretty solid for them. I think that was number 12 for me.
Was that it for our honorable mentions?
Yeah, I relinquished mine so that Jex could have the floor.
Oh man, too kind.
You guys don't realize Jex's second, third, and fourth pick all got knocked out of the top 30. So I'm glad we got to see them.
The thing, it's pretty obvious anybody that's watching that Jex leans to the heavy stuff, the heavier stuff. And by the way, I love the Garage Days EP. I absolutely love it. But I've got these self-imposed rules. My wife makes fun of me all the time for it, but it is what it is.
So we're at our number 1 album of 1987. Unlike a lot of these records, I gotta say that just about everybody could agree on this one. Almost everybody even placed it in their top 10. We're gonna hear about this one from Will, although Tim rated it at number 9. I had it at number 7. Jex had it at number 10, and Andy had it at 15. This is Aerosmith's comeback album, Permanent Vacation. Will, take it away.
So Aerosmith, again, this fell when I started making this list, like 2 or 3 weeks before Stevie Nicks. That actually was 1 week after I saw Aerosmith, and they played quite a bit from this album. So that might have helped me a little bit, but I still do really like this album. It's their 9th studio album. I'm going to get some blowback for this. It was their comeback album from a pretty bleak time period from like 76. It misses a lot of chunk of albums. I know Tim likes a couple of those albums, and I'm sure a few more you guys like them, but for me, it was the first album and kind of set them up for the album that followed, which was also talked about on the '89 episode. But it was 5 times platinum in Canada and the US. The hits for Ragdoll, Angel, and Dude Looks Like a Lady for very good reason. I believe they were all top 20 hits. But then you got stuff like Hangman's Jury, which they played and sounded really, really good. The title track I really like. St. John is good. The opener, Hearts Done Time, is also a really good song. It is on the longer side. Is it like 54 minutes or 56-minute album?
Yeah, it's pushing
It's
an
quite
hour,
long.
I think.
But it doesn't seem like it drags off too much, at least in my opinion. But yeah, everyone ranked this quite high, so I'll leave it at that. And it's just a solid album, and our number one for '87.
I'm amazed. It's a good album. I'm amazed this is the number one.
Yeah,
I really
same.
am.
But didn't expect it to be number one, that's for sure.
No. Song I always liked on this, I don't know if they ever did it live, but I always like Cimaraya, which was it's like heavy, but it's melodic at the same time. It's really heavy in places. And it was I don't have it anymore. I used to have a cassette. It was not a cassette single, but it was like an EP. It was like Dude Looks Like a Lady. It had like 3 versions of Dude Looks Like a Lady, and Cimaraya was the other song. So it must have been the regular B-side of that song. And I always really liked that one. Hearts Done Time is a great opener, featuring the sound of whales at the very beginning of it. They recorded some whales singing. The singles, of course, they reestablished the band, and they became, it brought them back, and then some. I like their version of I'm Down. It's the first time I ever heard it. I didn't, I knew it was a Beatles song from the credits, but I'd never heard the Beatles version of it. Girl Keeps Coming Apart's a funny one. Like, it's got some classic Tyler isms, wheeling and a dealing and buns up and all of that. And the instrumental of the movie is really interesting. You don't think of Aerosmith as a band that does instrumentals, but it's a kind of a neat way to close the album. And as much as I like this, I still think Pump's the superior album. But this set them up for it. You wouldn't have Pump without this, and then the success giving them the confidence to maybe do things a little bit more old school. It is a pretty poppy album for them, but it's not pop like they would get in later that would make you sick. Play.
I'd be curious to see what ranking Pump was at when the 3 of us did the '89
I can't remember. I think it was pretty high, but
superior album. I like that a lot more than this album, but it is a great album.
Jackson, will want to add anything else?
No, I think you guys got it covered once again. It's I think it's a good album. Took me a while actually to get into it. I used to kind of ignore it. I'm like, oh, it's got Dude Looks Like a Lady, that's overplayed and all this stuff, Ragdoll. But then when you sit down and actually listen to the album, like Hearts Done Time, like, hey, this is a good opener. And then a few others. I like the Beatles cover too, because I grew up listening to the Beatles because of my dad. So I knew the song I'm Down. And they did a really good job, kind of made it their own. But yeah, I think you guys said it really well. It's a good album. I don't consider it the comeback album. I think that was done with Mirrors, because I really like that album a lot. But it's then they kind of prove themselves that they're back.
Yeah, this was
the last.
This was the commercial comeback.
Yeah, exactly.
The last couple of things I'll say, when they played Ragdoll, they just cranked the drums way up, so the intro just sounded like it filled the entire city. It was unbelievable. And as far as Aerosmith ballads go, I don't like a lot of them, and mostly I think they just did too many of them. But Angel is probably one of the better ones between that and Crying for me. Mm-hmm. So for it being on this album, I don't think it's especially where it falls in the album, I don't think it's bad at all.
No. Agreed.
So there you have it. I'm as surprised as anybody. Our top 30 with a few honorable mentions from 1987. Some of the rankings were way off what I thought they might have been, and some of them are pretty much where I thought they'd be. That's what's fun about doing these. So guys, thanks for doing this. I know we planned it a lot. Sometimes it's hard to get everybody in the same place, but I think it was worth it. This is a really, really enjoyable episode. And curious out there, what did we miss? What should have been higher? What did we overrate? Let us know in the comments. And thanks everyone for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions.